You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
All right, joining me now is Bill Vickery. He is a Republican strategist and a principal and founder with Capital Advisors Group, which if you can't tell, it's on the cup right there. Former Democratic State Senator Joyce Elliott with Get Loud Arkansas. And are you repping West Rock Coffee now? So,
I had to have water, so why not?
They have good coffee as well. So thank you both for being here. Appreciate you very much. We're going to begin with Joyce. I'm going to come to you first. Charlie Daniels, 30-year public servant in the state of Arkansas, former Secretary of State, Land Commissioner, Auditor of State, great guy. I don't know anybody that didn't like Charlie Daniels, but tell me a little bit about your memories of Charlie Daniels.
Like you, I don't know anybody who didn't like him, but I remember the first time I heard his name, Charlie Daniels. I was a teacher in El Dorado. He was at Parkus Chapel, I think, on the school board, and didn't pay much attention to it except for the nexus between the two, Charlie Daniels. But he was, when I did get to know him, he was just always such a gracious person, always kind. Ran, of course, as a Democrat, but I never saw him do anything very partisan in terms of the way he represented people in our state. And I always admired that he wanted to explore all of state government by running for all these offices as Secretary of State, Auditor, Land Commissioner when I first knew him. But he was always very thoughtful and always willing to help and always a kind word. I'm sure somewhere in his life he said some bad things about somebody, but I have never heard them.
Bill, what about you?
Yeah, I'll echo what Joyce said. I'll say this, as a young guy coming up in politics, and on the Republican side, he was nothing but nice. He was always kind. To your point, Joyce, I've never heard him say an ill word about anybody. Very mild-mannered, very likable to begin with.
Yes.
And then, look, at the end of the day, you look at how he executed, especially the Secretary of State's office, and the way the Capitol underwent a lot of transformation during his period of time of which he was in charge. Those things are difficult things to do. It is. I have very fond memories, and happy to have called Charlie Daniels a friend, and he is an example of great name recognition in politics.
Yes.
Is a killer.
So there's a great story about that. Have you ever talked to Larry Crane, who was the Pulaski County clerk at one time? He ran against Charlie Daniels in that primary in 1984, and he said that the first event that he went to when he heard The Devil Went Down to Georgia by Charlie Daniels, playing at the political rally he was at, he goes, I'm toast, man. I don't have a chance. There's no way. So that song was probably about 2 or 3 years old when that came out. And Charlie tells a great story, too, of his campaign jingle had a guy fiddling on it.
Of course.
And it was like, hey, Charlie Daniels is a good fiddler, but this Charlie Daniels doesn't fiddle around, is what he said.
That's great.
It was a good one right there. All right, well, he will be missed, and he was just a gregarious, kind-hearted, but a great public servant, did some good things. All right, we have a $1.16 billion budget surplus in the state of Arkansas. I will let Bill tell us first how the state should spend that money, and then I'll let Joyce correct you.
Well, we do. Boy, that's a good setup there for me this morning.
Good.
Listen, I always feel like budget surpluses, you got to understand, where did the money come from to begin with? The government doesn't generate revenue. They take tax dollars from people who work in America, and understandably so, we pay tax dollars for our government to work, and I agree with that. However, when you see a surplus is continuing to run at such high levels, you do have to take into account how much of this deserves to go back to the individuals. And guess what they do with it? They then go out and spend it on things which helps to stimulate the economy. So it's not as though it's being hoarded in mason jars in people's yards. It has a real knock-on effect economically, and that ultimately is the bigger picture play for the long run.
I hear you saying tax cuts is what you're saying.
I believe so,
right,
yeah.
So, Joyce.
Well, I'm glad you used another word for tax cuts. That was a good start. Very good start. It is, in a sense, hoarding money. And I think the word that always gets me when we talk about these things, everybody is an individual. That's a great thing. But if we were to take the money and do something for the whole of the state, that would be even better. For example, we look at our infrastructure. We look at what we need to do for housing, what we need to do to make sure we are doing the things to make sure folks who need a leg up have a good quality of life. Because if we keep lowering taxes, and if we continue not to look at what's needed for the collective of the state, the quality of life is the biggest issue. We keep having crime because we're not addressing that. We could do some of those things for quality of life with this money, and it would be great for everybody, including the individual. And I think at some point, we really have to stop being so individualistic when we look at all the things we need in our state, and we just have another tax break.
Yep.
Great for my pocketbook or yours, I suppose, but it's the other folks in the state that I'm really worried about.
Texas, Tennessee, both no state income tax. Cut it any way you want to. They've exploded over the last decade. Post-COVID, they are on fire in terms of their economies and how they're growing. Texas has diversified away from an oil economy into a tech economy now. Tennessee, you look at Nashville, how it's blown up outside of country music.
Did that happen because of tax cuts?
I think it happens because companies and individuals will move there because they do look at the tax burden. When LeBron James went from Cleveland to Miami, you know what the number one thing that was discussed? No state income tax in the state of Florida. That shows
I thought it was a championship for the Heat.
No,
Discussed. Go ahead, Joyce.
I disagree with businesses are moving places because of tax cuts only. Because the other things businesses are looking at, we've got this $1 billion. What can we do for our infrastructure? Because these are the things at which they look. It is not just the tax cuts. Well, what about our educational systems? If we were investing in our educational systems in a way it was for everybody and not just in pieces. And once again, we get back to, it's not that I just want a great school for my child. We want a great educational system for everybody in the state. That's one thing they look at. And the other really big thing is quality of life.
Yeah.
These are the things when you look at these other states, they have heavily invested in quality of life. And I have a specific suggestion that we could invest in.
Well, let's hear it.
I really do think the way forward in this state is through art and technology. Mm-hmm. And in the 2021 session, Representative Warren and I got together and we did a lot of work on that to set the stage where we could start to do that, because everywhere around the state there is something related to the arts and technology. In every little hamlet, we could bring out this bill, take a look at it, help us get it finished, and invest millions in art and technology around the state, and it will change this state. There's just no doubt about it.
I feel like I have to set you up for a counter because this is like pickleball. Y'all just
Yeah.
go play with
it's
yourselves
great stuff.
there,
Listen,
so.
I'm glad we talked about education because I do agree. It's not just state income tax levels. Fantastic, we passed the LEARNS Act. That's fantastic. You want to talk about stimulating education? We're going to pay teachers a lot more money now. We're going to hold schools accountable. We're going to make sure that kids aren't trapped in failing schools for decade after decade. That's a fantastic thing that was done that also buoys economic
Are
development.
you making schools accountable when the money's going to the private schools and they don't have to answer like a public school does?
Happy to see those schools be held to the same standards. Happy to see it. Unfortunately,
in
what
the law,
happens is that these well, let's put it this way: if a private school fails its kids, it goes out of business because kids don't go there.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but I mean, I would put it forward to. Go ahead, Joyce.
I knew when I said this, I knew that would be your response. So that's why I threw schools in there, because
You set me up.
Yes, I
You set me
absolutely
up.
did.
Yeah,
I have
okay.
to admit it, Bill. The thing about it is, if people look at our educational system and even at LEARNS, what we see right away is when we use language like trapped in failing schools, well, we need to ask ourselves, why is it then that we want to move some out, but we're going to just accept having failing schools for some people and not for others? So it's right back to that individual thing. I've got to have a school that's great for my kid. Great. But we should not be on a trajectory where we're willing to accept, well, we've got to get these kids out of the failing schools, but we're going to leave some schools back here that we're not going to concentrate on. And it's not the schools that we need to be as concerned about when it comes to quality of life. You know, the biggest reasons that we have problems with our schools is we are not addressing those conditions that lead to all the problems kids have when they get to school.
You're talking about the early stuff like
Underlying
poverty and hunger
yes.
and yeah.
Where kids are coming from conditions that are ones that any one of us would want to live in. There are not the failing schools.
Is that the government's role, though? I mean, can the government do
Yes.
as well? But can they do everything to eliminate some of those things?
No, they can't. No, they can't. But I'll let you answer. The government can't do everything, but we can sure set the standard for whether or not a kid is going to have a home,
Yeah.
whether or not they're going to be in food deserts, whether or not when their parents get a job, it's a job that really is one that will support the family.
Yeah.
And we can provide
ahead.
enrichments in our schools so that this happens.
Hey, great. You know how you do that? You don't have a state income tax. You bring in big companies. You bring in economic development. You allow them to grow. You have those good jobs. How you don't do that is you continue to tax your way into oblivion. You continue to go down that hole. California's learning that lesson now. New York has learned it. Illinois has learned it. And they're seeing those companies flee to go to other places, and those jobs go with them, and that quality of life goes with it. So
They're not fleeing to Arkansas. Have you noticed that
well,
part?
right.
When
Yeah,
you
exactly.
said-
They're fleeing to Texas and Tennessee, the two states that I just
And
mentioned.
Florida.
And Florida.
And Florida. But what I'm saying to you, we have done this in what you said, this formula about things are going to trickle down because some people get money. We have been doing this for years, and it has not done what people keep promising it's going to do. We have the evidence, Bill.
I would disagree in the sense that we sit in the city today that has a high sales tax rate. It's at the cap in terms of the state. We pay the most. Your practical tax rate in the city of Little Rock is well over 50%. Well, it's for all three
Little
of
Rock
us.
had population growth in the last decade.
Yeah.
A couple of people moved in. You look at Little Rock compared to cities of comparable size in other states. Look at in Knoxville, Tennessee, for instance, in Tennessee, or Austin, Texas, when it was comparable to Little Rock 25, 30 years ago. I mean,
What's in
it just-
Knoxville, Tennessee? Is University?
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. But the
What's
point
in
is,
Austin?
I mean, sort of. I feel like my point is being made for me here. When you attract business, and you do so through educational initiatives and development of education and low tax rates, then you're able to have that quality of life. You're able to see those things. There is a genuine knock-on effect to all of that, as opposed to money going into a program that doesn't see a second generation of benefit.
Well, we're not talking about having programs. We're talking about creating a quality of life that's not about a program. Because we wouldn't have to have all these programs we have in schools if we were investing in our people in their communities. So when you look at, for example, look at what's happened in West Helena.
Yep.
There's something you can invest in rather than give somebody a loan. They need water.
Tell me what that means when you say people invest, when you're talking about investing in people in their communities. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about, for example, when I mentioned the art and technology bill. If we were to decide in Arkansas, we talk about rural and urban, which is almost farcical because everything is rural. If we were to think about have maybe a policy for what are we going to do? We'll take a look at, say, Cersei. What do we need in this place? I should pick another place because they're doing okay. Let's just say West Helena. Look at West Helena. What does any community need to be a great community? Well, if you don't have water, if you don't have amenities in West Helena, if you don't have good housing, we can't get teachers to move certain places because of housing. If people don't have jobs, and those who do have jobs where they can't even make a living for their families, these are the kinds of things I'm talking about that $1 billion could help us think through.
Last word, 60 seconds.
Sure. Well, listen, obviously we have a fundamental disagreement
No,
here.
I think y'all both have the same political philosophy
well,
here. This has
listen,
been great.
what
I'll
I
try to
think
get
is
some
we
more
both
diversity.
want the same thing. See, I don't believe that Joyce hates Arkansas. I believe just the opposite. I believe she wants it to win. No, but you know what I mean.
That's true. Yeah,
Like
that's
we
right.
can disagree on the method by which we both want to get to a sound, good state where we continue to grow and see those things.
Yeah.
I just happen to believe that to sustain it for the long term and have it be genuine, it can't be funded over and over and over again by the government to put into programs. It has to be developed through the private sector and have business come in, and that's where you put things like $1 billion surplus. If you have a long-term goal, you spend the money attracting those things because it's multi-generational in its impact.
All right, Joyce Elliott, Bill Vickery, always fun to have you two on the set together.
She
Thank
really
you
wants
very
to. I
much.
mean, she's got
know.
something on her mind right
I
now.
know. She's going to pound you when
Yeah,
we're out the
exactly.
air here. All right.
Yeah.
We're back with more right after this.